And next we'll deal with the shaping stage, which is called Khalq, K-H-A-L-Q, and the first part of that is the Alaka stage. This second or shaping stage begins as the Alaka, which is an Arabic word meaning a leech. And when I was first asked about this, did the human embryo look like a leech? And when I thought about this for a few minutes, I realized that it resembled the leech very closely, as you will see. During the early stage, the embryo loses its rounded shape and elongates until it takes the shape of a leech. And this picture here, I went over to our library and got out a book on leeches and had my artist draw that exactly from the textbook showing a leech. And here's a human embryo here, and they're on the 21, 22 days. And I think you have to agree that they look very much alike. In fact, you see that the leech has segments, just like a worm, and the human embryo has these same segments. In fact, we still have a remnant of those segments in our bodies. If any of you have ever had shingles, ever heard of anyone having shingles, you always get the eruptions and bands across the area that's infected, and those bands are the remnants of those segments. So this is what I believe to be the leech-like appearance of the human embryo. And I believe in my descriptions in my book, I talk about it having a leech-like appearance. The similarity between the embryo and a leech is amazing. The embryo is attached to the wall of the chorionic sac, which is attached by chorionic villi to the endometrium or lining of the uterus. And so the human embryo is attached to the lining of the uterus, just like a leech will attach to your skin. I don't know whether you have leeches here or not, but we have certain lakes in Canada. If you go in swimming, these leeches will attach to your skin and suck the blood. So the analogy there is quite amazing. Initially, the embryo acquires a primitive circulatory and nervous system during this early stage. Thus, the term Alaka refers to the leech-like external appearance of the embryo, as well as to its clinging relationship to the uterus, and is an appropriately descriptive term for this stage. Another meaning mentioned by the interpreters for Alaka is similar to a blood clot. And the external appearance of the embryo during this phase is similar to that of blood due to the appearance of the primitive heart and the cardiovascular system. If you look at the picture at the bottom, it shows an embryo of about 22 or 23 days, and the bottom is the yolk sac, and the embryo is the part at the top, and you see all these blood vessels. And if you were to see an embryo at that stage, and I should say that most embryos will undergo spontaneous abortion at about this stage. In other words, when they're about 2 or 3 weeks old, they will often spontaneously abort. That means that they just are expelled from the mother's uterus without a known cause, although we've done a lot of studies on this and find that many of them have very abnormal chromosomes, and they couldn't have survived if they had lived. So, as we used to say in the old days, this was God's way of ridding the body of something that was very abnormal. But anyway, we do know that they are aborted at this early stage, and they do look like a clot of blood, because when they pull away from the uterus, then you have all these exposed blood vessels which have the bloody appearance. So this explains one interpretation for Alaka as a blood clot. I prefer the one being a leech-like structure. Now, the blood does not circulate until the end of the 3rd week, but on the 21st day, the heart of the embryo connects with blood vessels in the embryo, the connecting stalk, and the chorion, and the blood starts to circulate, as you could see in this diagram in the bottom. Thus, the embryo takes the appearance of a blood clot, even though its blood is fluid. And these features incorporate the other meaning of a blood clot for the Alaka phase. Now, the next stage is the Mudga stage. And again, when I was asked what this meant, it says, it reminded me of an embryo at this stage. And when I was told that the mudga meant a chewed substance, I thought of the embryo here. You see these little bead-like structures, which we call somites. They are beginning of what will be the vertebrae or the backbone. And I suggested that this chewed stage could be referring to these somites, which have the appearance of a chewed substance. If you take, as I did at that time, took a piece of gum and bit into it, and you're left with these teeth marks, which look very much like this. So this stage, the mudga stage, occurs at about 26 to 27 days, and we call that the somite period in descriptive embryology. The transformation from the alaka to the mudga is very rapid, and during the last day or two of the alaka stage, the embryo is beginning to develop some of the characteristics of the mudga, that is, the somites begin to appear. The word mudga means a piece of substance which has been chewed, and is used to describe this next phase of embryonic development. It should apply with the shape of a substance that the teeth have chewed. In fact, the appropriateness of this term mudga has been indicated in modern embryology. It has been termed that after the formation of the embryo in the placenta, this stage, the embryo receives its nutrients and energy, thereby rapidly increasing the growth process. The bodily masses called somites, from which the bones and the muscle will form, start to appear. During the multitude of bead-like structures or somites that are present, the embryo has the appearance of a substance that had been imprinted by teeth. The processes of this period can be recognized in the following points. First, the appearance of the somites or the imprints changes constantly, and just as the teeth imprints change on a substance with each act of chewing. The embryo changes its overall shape, but the structure derived from the somites remain. And secondly, the embryo turns in its position due to the modifications in its center of gravity with the new tissue formation, similar to the turning of a substance with chewing. And third, just as a chewed substance becomes curled before being swallowed, so does the back of the embryo become curved. And four, as the somites form, the internal features of the embryo in the mudga stage are partly differentiated into organ anlaga, that means the beginning of structures, and partly undifferentiated. And this description is also stated in the Quran. Now, this is a later stage of mudga. You can see the tail that we all had at that stage, and this little flipper-like structure is what's going to be your upper limb. And so this is the mudga stage. The next slide. Then out of the chewed-like substance, partly differentiated and partly undifferentiated. And when I was asked what this surah meant, it said it's clear to me that an embryo at that stage is only partly differentiated. In other words, some of the organs, like the early development of the eye and the ear and the heart, some parts are well differentiated, others are poorly differentiated, and some are undifferentiated. And so we have this mixture which agrees exactly with this particular surah. Thus the term mudga is very meaningful, since the embryo is a lump of irregularly shaped tissue at this stage, and a creation of systems is occurring while the overall process is incomplete. Some of the organs will form in the mudga stage, and some will form in later stages. Now the next stage is called the izam stage. This subsequent stage, phase of development, is referred to as izam, which means bones. And the fetus does indeed acquire a cartilaginous skeleton after the mudga stage. Those of you that have studied embryology realize that first of all you have what we call mesenchymal bones made out of connective tissue, then they become cartilaginous, and then they become ossified and become bones, solid bones. The formation of the bone does not begin uniformly throughout the body. Rather, there's a sequential appearance of bony tissue. In recent decades, the process of osteogenesis in the human embryo has been reasonably well documented. Bone development in the limbs commences in the embryonic limb buds from these mesenchymal or connective tissue cells. Primary ossification centers appear in the femur during the 5th week. The femur is your thigh bone. And in the sternum breastbone, and the maxilla, jaw, during 8 to 9 weeks. The timing of the Izam phase has been mentioned in the following hadith. These simply show these various stages when, at this stage, the bones in the limb would be cartilaginous. The same here, we're starting to get little indications of the bones developing. And in this hadith says, when 42 nights have passed from the time of the nutfah, that is the time of conception, Allah sends an angel to it who shapes it and makes its ears, eyes, skin, muscles, and bones. In the early part of this phase, the embryo takes on a human appearance, Tazwir ad-Dami, and the hadith describes this with the word shapes. Before the 42nd day, it is difficult to distinguish the human embryo from the embryos of many animals, but at this stage it becomes clearly distinguishable in its appearance. I couldn't tell a mouse embryo from a human embryo or a rabbit embryo in those very early stages. So as this hadith is making clear, is that after this 40th day, when the angel sends an angel to it, which shapes it and so on, that it takes on its human characteristics. Accompanying this development is a straightening of the embryo described by the word sawa. During this period, the embryo becomes more erect and acquires a more evenly rounded body. Some of the generalized cells of the embryo begin to differentiate into various lines and modify into different functional moieties. This process results in straightening and the formation of organs necessary for viability. As the Quran describes, when God created you, then, and the word fa means then, made you even and straight, sawak, and then fa, again, modified you, adalak, and so on. According to the table, and is that on the slide, the table? Showing the different stages. Here's the table which you're referring to. You can see these stages listed along the side here, and you have the shaping stage and so on. These are all correlated with the age and days and the actual size of the embryo. According to this table, which compares the 3 ayat on the stages of development, it is apparent that the Izam stage corresponds with the straightening stage, taswiyah. The word sawak in the Quranic statement indicates the following. First, to straighten the position of the body from a bent position, and also to make uneven things leveled. The embryo at the 7th week has a bent back, thus taking the shape of the letter C during the mudga stage. In the Izam stage, the bending position is straightened and the surface becomes more even due to the disappearance of prominences and depressions. Now the Lam stage, although precursor cells, which we call myoblasts or early muscle cells, are present adjacent to the developing bones, differentiation into skeletal muscle attachments appears after the ossification process in the shaft and the ends of the bones. I was asked many times, did the bones appear before the muscles? Well, they certainly do. If you want to be logical about it, you wouldn't have muscles until you had something to attach them to. So you have bones and then the muscles. And this is clearly stated in the Quran that the bones appear first. A major developmental landmark during the 8th week is the Lam stage, which describes the myogenesis, that is the formation of muscles, which marks the development of the definitive muscles in the trunk and the limbs and the beginning of movement. The muscles take their position around the bones, that is, clothing the bones, and continue the process of straightening and smoothing, tazwiyah. In other words, as the muscles develop, they straighten the embryo up, which the straightening and smoothing which began in the Izam stage. It is now known that the gonads, that is, the developing sex glands, differentiate into testes and ovaries at this time, that is, during the 8th week, and the Quran refers to this development as well. Now the growth stage, or the nasha stage, The Lam stage represents the end of the embryonic period. We say that the embryonic period ends at the end of the 8th week, and then it becomes the fetal period. So here in this terminology, the Lam stage represents the end of the embryonic period, in other words, the end of the 8th week, during which much of the organogenesis, or the development of the organ, occurs. The Quran uses the word, how do we pronounce that, halanga? Yeah, okay. Which translated means made or changed. Okay. In referring to all the embryonic stages. Kalakna, is that how we say it? I can't get my tongue around that one.
Yeah, khalaqna.
Kalakna, okay. Indicates that the new organized tissues are being formed in these stages. However, with the 9th week, the period of fetal development, Hasha, Nasha, begins. The Quran clearly distinguishes the beginning of this period by using the word Ashanu Nafu in the following statement. Then we, Anasha Nafu, cause him to grow and come into being and attain the definitive human form. Anasha Nahu means to initiate, to grow and develop, and to rise and increase. The interpreters of the Quran understood the following meanings for the Quranic passage. Development of the fetus into a creature capable of speaking, hearing, and seeing, breathing the spirit into the fetus, and find the characteristics of the Nasha stage. The following characteristics of the Nasha stage are rapid growth and development. And this, again, this chart is from my book. As you can see, in the early stages, the 9th week, 12th, and so on, there's very little growth occurring there. The organs are developing rapidly. And then, as you see from the 12th week on, there's very rapid development. And these fetuses are drawn to exact scale, so that you can see that the development is very rapid. So it's a period of rapid growth and development, which directly applies with the meaning of Nasha, as explained. Directly after the Lam stage, that is the 9th week, until the 12th week, the fetus grows slowly, and then the growth becomes very rapid. There's also change in the nature of the fetus and the development of its organs. The skeleton develops from soft cartilaginous bones to more solid calcified bones, and by the time of 12 weeks gestation, centers of ossification are present in most bones. The limbs become differentiated, and nails can be detected on the fingers and toes. The proportional sizes of the head, body, and limbs change, and their relative proportions become more balanced, particularly between the 9th and 12th weeks. Lanugo hair, that's very fine hair that the fetuses have, and newborn babies have the same. The proportional size of the head and the body and the limbs change, and this hair appears on the skin, which is fully differentiated into the epidermis and hypodermis by the 12th week. The external genitalia begin to differentiate in the 9th week, and also the testes begin their descent, and the internal genitalia develop. At this stage, in the 12th week, a male fetus can be distinguished from a female on the basis of its external genitalia. Voluntary and smooth musculature are established. Fetuses at this stage of development reveal or mimic spontaneous movements, and reflex muscular contractions can be elicited by an external stimulus. In general, the overall physiological development of the nervous system parallels the maturation of the brain and the spinal cord. Primitive and instinctive responses, such as sucking and grasping, are subcortical functions and appear much later. Nevertheless, this stage of development represents an important transitional landmark for the fetus because it has reasonably well-coordinated reflexes and movements which can be progressively vigorous in time. And I should say that we can study these stages very easily now in developing humans, because with the techniques of ultrasound and also fetoscopy, you can actually watch these fetuses moving, and you can see that some of them will even begin to suck their thumbs before they're born. Other delicate and subtle developments occur in the fetus, which has changed from its first creation, the embryo, to another one, the fetus, as the Quran has described. The third point is that there's extensive and continued development of organ systems. The embryonic period, which ends with the Lam stage, is characterized by the gradual appearance of organs. The fetal period, which follows, is characterized by the preparation of the organ systems to perform their functions. Because as soon as the baby is born, it must be able to breathe on its own, it must be able to, its heart must be able to circulate, and all the other organs have to be functional. The fetal period, which follows, is characterized then by the preparation of these organ systems to perform their functions. As the interpreters mentioned, this is the meaning of the Quranic phrase, come into being and attain the definitive form, that is, the human form. And thus the fetus is made into a creature capable of speaking, hearing, and seeing. The fourth part is the acquisition of a soul, and according to the Islamic information, the soul comes to the embryo sometime after the 40 to the 45 days in development, as mentioned in the hadith related by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. The Prophet, peace be upon him, the truthful and trusted, told us, in every one of you, all components of your creation are collected together in your mother's womb by 40 days. And in that is a nalika like that, then is a mudga like that. Then God sends an angel ordered with 4 instructions. He is told to record his, the human being now developing, deeds, his provision, future benefits, whether he will be miserable or happy, and then the spirit is breathed into him, that is, the soul is acquired. The hadith indicates that there is some delay after the 7th week, according to the use of the word thumma. Embryological studies have not determined the acquisition of a soul to which the Quranic commentators referred. The nature of the soul is generally outside the realm of experimental science and is essentially unknown at this time to mankind. As God says in the Quran, they ask thee concerning the Spirit. Say, the Spirit comes by command of my Lord. Of knowledge it is only a little that is communicated to you, O men. However, what we do know is that there is a difference between life and the soul, although the nature of both is a mystery. A creature with a soul has self-awareness. On the other hand, the sperm and the ovum are alive, since without life they would be unable to participate in fertilization. When the fetus is capable of moving voluntarily from his or her own desire, as opposed to moving reflexly, this could be taken as evidence that he has acquired a soul. During the 10th week of development, for example, the fetus exhibits spontaneous movements and moves in response to stimuli. While these movements may reflect primitive neurological reflexes and do not present conclusive evidence of the presence of a soul, they do indicate that the soul is probably acquired near this time, and this would be in agreement with the time frame presented in the Islamic statements. Now the word ansha nahu, as it is used in the Quran, covers the most apparent external and internal developments and changes in features in this stage of human development. The 3 meanings given for nasha comprehensively apply to this stage. To initiate applies with the initiation of the functioning of various organ systems. For example, the kidneys begin to form urine, blood cells begin to form in the bone marrow, and the hair follicles first appear in the 10th week, and so on, to grow and develop. Applies with the rapid growth and the extensive development of all the organ systems of the body, which occurs during this stage. And to rise and increase applies with the very rapid increase beginning in the 12th week in the length and the weight of the fetus. Therefore, the term nasha appropriately and accurately applies to the fetal period of development. And number 7, the timing of the developmental events. Not only is the sequencing of the embryonic and fetal developments indicated by the order in which they are mentioned in the Quran, but also the timing of these events is indicated by the use of the conjunctives fa, which means then, with a little delay, and thumma, which means then with some delay. The occurrences afa and thumma, both of which are translated as then, are as follows. We, God, created man from a quintessence of clay. We then, Thumma, placed him as a nutfa, a drop, in a place of settlement, firmly fixed. Then, Thumma, we made the nutfa into an alaka, leech-like structure, and then, Fa, we changed the alaka into a mudga, chewed-like substance, and then, Fa, we made out of that mudga izam, or skeleton or bones. Then, Fa, we clothed the skeleton with lam, muscles and flesh. Then, Thumma, we caused him to grow and come into being and attain the definitive form, human form. So blessed be God, the best to create. The use of Thumma then indicates that there is a delay between the following events. First, the Nutfa stage developing into the Alaka, first stage of the shaping stage. Lam, the last stage of the shaping, Kalok stage, until the development of Nasha, the fetal period. During the implantation or hearth phase of the Nutfa stage, there is a slow rate of development until the Alaka stage. It takes about a week from the beginning of the hearth, that is the day 6, for the connecting stalk to form, day 14, such as the embryo becomes attached and hanging. And it takes about 10 days for the notochord to begin development on the day 16 in order for the embryo to take on the appearance of a leech or an alaka. Thus there is some delay in the formation of the alaka stage. A lot of this is related to developing blood vessels to acquire nourishment from the mother. The Nasha or fetal stage can be considered as being in the 9th week, but is delayed in the expression of all its characteristics until later. For example, the period between the beginning of the 9th week and the end of the 11th week is a period of relatively slow growth, and it is not until the 12th week that the rapid growth indicated by Anasha Nahu begins. Additionally, the initiation of development of certain organ systems occurs after the 8th week or after the Lam stage. But the changes in these organs become more apparent after the 11th week. Thus there is a delay until the 12th week for the full expression of Nasha, and the word Thumma accurately indicates this delay. The word Fa indicates that the following stages occur directly after one another. Alaka changing to Mudga, Mudga changing to Izam, Izam changing to Lam. The embryo of 24 to 25 days is the end of the Alaka stage, and it makes a direct change into the Mudga stage at 26 to 27 days. The Mudga stage lasts until the 6th week, and then changes directly into the Izam by the beginning of the 7th week, since the skeleton begins its appearance at that time. The Lam stage follows in the 8th week, immediately after the Izam stage, since the muscle precursor cells begin their development into muscle as soon as the bone is formed and the muscles can become attached. Thus the word Fa is used in the Quran to accurately and strongly indicate that these developments follow one another immediately with no delay. Now, the conclusions of this study are that the terms which have been used in the Quran are very descriptive of developments which occur in the various stages, and they describe these events in their chronological order. Morphological changes that occur with development in each stage are also accurately described by the use of these terms. Because the staging of human embryos is complex, going through a continuous process of change during development, it is proposed that a new system of classification could be developed, using the terms mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah. The proposed system is simple, comprehensive, and conforms with present embryological knowledge. The facts about human development that could not have been known by Muhammad, peace be upon him, in the 7th century, because most of them were not discovered until the 20th century. Muslims and others are justified in concluding that these facts could only have been revealed to Muhammad, peace be upon him, by God, who knows all about us, not only about how we develop, but how we live and function. Thank you very much.